Hi, this is Terry Francona, and you're listening to Out of Left Field on the Grueling Truth Network.
Hey guys, welcome back to Out of Left Field. Graham and Chris here with you again. Brought to you by the Grueling Truth Network, thegruelingtruth.net, and at Grueling Truth on Twitter, where legends speak. Plenty of stuff going on in the world of sports. Starting this week, week one of the NFL. Good news, Chris and I are not in a fantasy league together this year, so you don't have to hear about our fantasy team. So good luck for you. No one loves me in this story. But we're going to go ahead and get right into the stories. There are a lot of stuff to get to. Our power rankings, our final power rankings of the 2018 regular Major League Baseball season. And let's take a slight detour from our normal start to the show. And we're going to go – we really wanted to start in Los Angeles, but we're going to actually move to the Midwest here for just a moment and discuss something that is near and dear to Chris and I, extremely near and dear to Chris and I and everybody else who might be listening that is a male. If you have kids, just slide them away from the tablet or the radio for just a minute while we discuss this. We want to go ahead and just lay this out, then we'll discuss it. Of course, you can always find us on iTunes and on iHeartRadio. So, like I said, away from the radio, away from the tablet, all the good stuff. White Sox first baseman Jose Abreu is recently returned from a DL stint where he originally went on for some lower body abdominal pain, which ended up being a testicle that twisted around and became tangled up on its own. According to Jose Abreu, the testicle turned sideways and became strangled. Quote, the doctor had to perform emergency surgery to save it. I never thought about it, but it was serious. The doctors, they did a very good job, and everything is good. They saved the testicle. I'm really glad and thankful, like I said before, for all the people who helped me and who were there for me. I feel very grateful right now, close quote. Now, if any of you already can't feel the just emotional pain that I think every person should feel for Abreu, and as well as for guys like Yadier Molina, who had the foul ball to the cup earlier this year. This is a quote. This is on Deadspin, and I'm going to make this a lot nicer because Deadspin doesn't really worry about bringing that kind of news type of medium. So there is some more language in here that we want to provide on the show. But the Mayo Clinic says testicular torsion involves twisting of the spermatic cord, which has the effect of reducing blood flow to the affected area and causing, quote, sudden and often severe pain and swelling, plus nausea, vomiting, frequent urination, and a testicle that is positioned higher than normal or at an unusual angle, close quote. Saying that, I bring in Chris Furry. Chris, how you doing today?
Oh, I've been better, thanks. Honestly, one of the great things.
I really don't know.
One of the great things about this story is, at least from the standpoint of somebody who gets to report it, is that Abreu did undergo successful surgery to save the testicle, which is good news for anyone, right? We're thankful that this wasn't a bigger issue, which it could have been. He could have lost the testicle, and that probably would have ended his season, to be honest. As it is, Abreu has been recalled from the DL. He started today for the White Sox. But he said, and I quote, "It was one of my testicles turned sideways and was strangled. The doctor had to perform emergency surgery to save it. I never thought about it, but it was serious. The doctors, they did a very good job, and everything is good. They saved the testicle. I'm really glad and thankful for all the people who helped me and who were there for me. I feel grateful now. Those are the sort of things you never think about, and when that happens, you realize, oh, things happen. I'm just thankful everything is good," close quote. The greatest part about this story is that everything is going to be okay. And the best part is that he paid a man to say that for him.
Yeah. I mean, kind of like you just repeated the same quote I just read to just make everybody cringe one more time. But hey.
No, I did that on purpose.
Oh. No, I mean, you know.
I figured we had this conversation that my job on the show is to make people cringe. And I really just wanted to nail that point home.
You definitely did. I mean, it was – I'm not going to lie. I mean, reading it once is bad enough. Reading it twice is below the belt. But no, I mean, you're right with this. And the thing is – and they are extremely fortunate that he is okay, because this opens up, much to the chagrin of the White Sox, a bigger issue in that Michael Kopech, who is a very, very young – talented, extremely hard thrower of the baseball, is undergoing Tommy John surgery, a player who the White Sox got back in the Adam Eaton trade when they sent Eaton to the Nationals. He was the kid was kind of the younger version of Thor, long blonde, shaggy-haired kid. Granted, he cut the long blonde hair now, but this is something that could have derailed the White Sox season worse than it already is. Thankfully, like I said, all joking aside, thankfully he is okay. And I mean, we will leave it alone of making any more additional jokes on that, because I mean that's just at some point, I mean, you just, I don't know. It's still kind of a family show, so we'll leave it at that. I think more so now. What you got, man?
Oh no, I was saying ceasefire.
Yeah. We'll go ahead and moving on to a more probably the story that is more so really kind of on point with what is happening in the world of baseball right now. Shohei Ohtani, comes back from the DL. We were thinking, man, might have to have Tommy John surgery. They give him the PRP, the platelet-rich plasma injection to the elbow. Things are looking better. Hey, we're going to let him pitch. He throws, tries to barehand a ball off the bat, bends his finger back. And as you begin to watch him get 4 or 5 innings deep, you see his velocity drop dramatically. You're welcome. Yep, dramatically. If you've been a fan of the show for a while, you remember we made that that hoopsie. I'm like throwing a little inside humor around, but it did. His fastball dropped from 97, 98 to sometimes sub-90s. Comes out afterwards that he is going to need, it's been recommended to have Tommy John surgery, yet is somehow still hitting. They're trying to use him to finish out the year. Man, I think you and I both are at the point where I know you questioned more the purpose of having him pitch. I think that there are some pieces to that are not going to be made public to the media that, for me, can influence my feelings one way or the other. But at the end of it, you are still looking at a phenom who is, I think, 23 years old and is going to miss all of next year and potentially a good month to maybe 3 months into 2020.
Right. And this is a big deal. And I think in my final opinion on this is that the Angels have made a mistake with Shohei Ohtani here. Not only in allowing him to throw in that game where it was completely unnecessary. I mean, they really just did it to let the guy throw. I get wanting to get an idea of where he is and if the Tommy John is necessary, but I feel like the decision could have been made without a final outing. They had all of the information, and they chose to throw Ohtani. And the problem with that is, if he had gotten hurt worse than just re-inflaming that UCL,
Right.
if he'd gotten really hurt, it could have been a big, big deal. And then the decision, and we've talked about Ohtani's swing, the decision to continue letting him DH for the end of the year, I think is going to end up being a mistake. And I remember I asked you while we were talking about this before the show, what's the difference between September and October? Well, now that I think about it, there's a lot of healing difference in 30 days. There's a lot of healing difference in a month. And the difference between 13 months and 16 months could be huge.
Yeah, I mean, and we're at a point now where, and I get the doctors that are involved here know way more about the human body than we do. In some cases, I'm very happy about that, as you could tell by our last story. But this is one of those things where we discussed this. Ohtani is very much an upper body power generator,
Right.
Which works for him because he's young. But guess who the last guy is we saw try to be an upper body power generator, and it failed for him miserably? It's Miguel Cabrera. We saw him 2 years ago try and change his swing and be a guy who could attack the fastball up in the zone, even up out of the zone, and try and generate that trunk torque, that torsion, if you will, to attack the baseball. And in doing so, he was missing the baseball underneath of it. He hurt his obliques because everything was upper body. He wasn't really using his legs to drive the power through the zone and keeping the bat head out. It was all arms, elbows, and wrists trying to bring that bat around as quick as he can. Ohtani is young and can get the bat head around extremely fast, almost Javi Baez fast, maybe even a little bit faster than a Javi Baez can do, because Baez is great at keeping his hands really tight to the body and getting that bat head around very, very fast. Ohtani is a guy who completely extends those arms almost to the point where if he gets one off the wrist, could potentially hyperextend that elbow. And that's where you begin to wonder, okay, at what point is letting him hit in a season where your playoff hopes have been dashed months ago potentially going to cause him to be out more because you continue to inflame this? The only thing I can think of is that the doctors are saying he can't do any more damage to the UCL. We have to remove the whole thing and put a new tendon in there anyway and drill the holes. It doesn't matter what he does, get him the experience, and we'll do the surgery. To me, it's just there are more things that can go wrong if he is beginning to compensate for that discomfort in other ways. It changes his swing, it changes what he's used to doing, and it can begin to cause other parts of his body to hurt.
Right, and getting a repetitive motion injury because he changes something subtly in order to make that swing less painful could
Matt Harvey.
Yeah, it could be hugely damaging to the rest of his career. Hugely damaging. I mean, in the end, I think Shohei Ohtani is going to come out of this probably okay, but in my mind, the risk to his health and the risk to the future of the Angels, who've spent so much money on this guy, it's really not worth letting him hit for the rest of the year. It really wasn't worth letting him pitch the other night. I really think that all of those decisions, this is a chain reaction of poor decision-making on the part of the Angels.
Yeah, because he is not at an age where he becomes a big poppy. He is not at an age or a place in his career where you can use him solely as a hitter. He's a fantastic hitter, but the reason the Angels invested so much money in him was his ability to play both sides of the ball, his ability to pitch, and his ability to hit. And it's one of those things of, do you want to, run the risk of trying to teach him a new position and try and get him to grasp it, all at the same time having to use an interpreter, and then also figure out if, what you invest, you're already seeing that what you invested in potentially may have little to no return, or at least less than 50% of the return that you were hoping it would have when you went into this entire thing.
And what if Shohei Ohtani is one of those 20%ers, man?
I mean, it's one of the quotes that has stuck out with me for years. And I've said this on the show multiple times. If you're just hanging out with us, joining us. Thank you. It's great to have you all here on Out of Left Field. Proud to be part of the Grueling Truth Network. Be sure to check out our Facebook page, Out of Left Field, with Chris and Graham on Facebook. Of course, at OO Left Field on Twitter. And join the Out of Left Field baseball community page. Just a page for some fun. We post a show there. Fun things you'll talk about. Send us some good stuff. Of course, you can always send us messages as well. We definitely love responding to you guys when we get messages from you on social media. But Mark Mulder said this years ago, and I loved it, and it was kind of heartbreaking to hear. I think you and I both can agree the most heartbreaking thing we've ever heard from a baseball player was Prince Fielder saying, "The doctors just told me I can't play baseball anymore," in a neck break. I mean, there to me was nothing that heart-wrenching than that. That's different than the whole Jose Fernandez, D. Gordon. But
it harkens back to the Lou Gehrig speech, to be honest.
Right, exactly. Don't feel bad for me. But Mulder said, he had Tommy John surgery. He was ready to come back, and he told his doctor, "Doc, the hell's going on here? I'm not feeling right. I keep hurting. I'm not getting my velocity back. This is supposed to make me better. Like, what's wrong with me?" And the doctor finally said, "Mark, someone's got to be the 20%. And he said that's when it finally clicked to him that, damn, I'm one of those guys who it just doesn't take. And you don't know before you say, "All right, Dr. Andrews, good night. See you when I wake up." You don't know if that's going to be you. Steven Strasburg has made a lot of money. He is not the Steven Strasburg that we thought he would be when he was a number 1 overall pick from San Diego State and came in the big leagues 3 months later.
Right. I look forward to seeing where this goes for Shohei Ohtani, but my only concern is that it's not going to end well. And it's early in his career. He's a young ball player, but it's also a huge stake on the part of the Los Angeles Angels. And I don't know where they go if it goes poorly.
He becomes one of those guys that, like Taylor Jordan used to be was a pitcher up and down out of the minors to the Nationals. Graduated from a high school that I umpire at relatively frequently. Because we know Ohtani's name, it is different. But this becomes he can become one of those young pitchers who had so much promise, but you never, ever heard of because he just could never bounce back after he had to go under the knife. And Tommy John surgery is now such a, it's such a I don't say free for all, but it's such a common surgery now.
It's so frequent.
I mean, we laugh to this day still knowing how it's going to change, but and I'm sure we discussed this, and maybe this, it might be one of those pieces of trivia that kind of have just slipped your mind over time. It always I remember it because I was such a big fan. But John Smoltz is currently the only pitcher in the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame to have had Tommy John surgery. Once.
Which is it's insane to think about how often we hear about Tommy John now that
we're seeing pitchers, position guys. Corey Seager had to have it now.
Yeah, and we see position guys at lower levels of the game having to have it. I told you about the kid from the high school here who blew his UCL and his career was over. I mean, Tommy John may have been an option, but it's in how the game is played, how the ball is thrown now, and this idea that you have to throw from the elbow is damaging.
Right.
Yeah, sure, the velocity's there, the speed is there, but at what cost?
Yeah, I mean, the AL West has turned into, the AL West has been flipped end over end from the beginning of the year. And of course, your good friend, our mutual friend, I don't know him that well, but Jason and I think are pretty good acquaintances, for the little bit of time that we've spent. We every now and again, we'll exchange pleasantries, usually, through you or whatever, if we happen to be commenting on the same thing. But, he mentioned this to you, that he wasn't going to be a believer in Seattle just yet. And we started this year with, of course, the Astros expected to be on top, the World Series winners. All of a sudden, man, the Angels were just on a freaking tear, lighting up, the division, giving the Astros a run for their money. Then Cozart goes out, and then Ohtani goes out, and Trout got hurt for a bit. We saw that the Angels' decline kind of begin. And then, oh, my God, Cano is out because he, put a needle in his butt that he should have taken. And then, holy crap, here's D. Gordon. And the Mariners are driving, and where the heck did the A's come from? And now the A's are still sitting just as pretty as can be, just fighting their, their hearts out. Hopefully Sean Manaea comes back. The injury isn't too severe for him. The Mike Fiers deal is looking pretty good for the A's right now from the deadline. But then you get this coming out of Seattle as they have begun, to slowly slide back in the standings. They're 5-5 in their last 10, 7.5 games out of the wild card, 10.5 games back of the Astros. They're 79 and 64, 9 games, their magic number to elimination. And then you hear that D. Gordon, who, whatever you think about him from his own PED issue, politely and quietly asked the media to vacate the clubhouse for a few minutes. And the doors were shut, and the noise didn't stay away. And Gordon and Segura Gene Segura got into an extremely heated exchange that ended up kind of falling out the doors of the clubhouse, and both had to be physically restrained. Now, Robinson Cano said, quote, "Whatever happens in here stays in here. It didn't affect anyone in here. We let it go. We're good. Everyone is good. We left that behind," close quote. And from my understanding, at least what I have read, is that it is believed to have been caused from a fly ball that I believe that Gordon dropped. It just, man, it's one of those things where Scott Service kind of downplayed it. I don't think this is quite the same thing as the Papelbon Harper fight in the dugout a year or two ago, which pretty much sealed the fate of Matt Williams being fired by the Nationals. As a player, obviously you coach some guys, you still play rec ball, and I know the way that you play, you can be kind of a jackhole at times to umpire because you're so passionate about the game. But and I say that in an endearing way because you play the game with a fire that a lot of guys don't bring with them to a rec league type of game. And maybe it's because, as you've talked to us about on the show before, that some opportunities you had never came to fruition because of choices you had, but you that fire, that zeal for the game has never left you. It's why you're invaluable on the show. You can blame the alcohol for that, folks. I'm just saying that because I'm just kidding. He really is. I mean, I don't think you listen to the show the same way without him here arguing with me and bringing the way that he does. But I'm going to ask you, is this a good thing for the ball club? A bad thing? It doesn't seem to have really propelled them forward, gained any kind of momentum or something to rally around. Is this just fracturing in that clubhouse because of how poorly they have begun to play at the tail end of the year?
Well, it never does. It's never a good thing to have the former best leadoff hitter in the league and the former National League hits champion duking it out in the clubhouse. Both of these guys play ball well. Both of these guys have a passion for this game. Sometimes this is one of those things you just got to get out, right? You got to let these two guys get their emotions in order. And sometimes the only way to do that is to be a little bit more heated and physical. But the reality is, no. When you say, oh, this is about the dropping of a routine fly ball, that's not true. And you can blame whatever single incident you want, but that was just a catalyst that set fire to a much larger issue. And yes, I do think that this has something to do with how this team has slid in the last month. And yes, I do think that this has something to do with the way things are going in Seattle right now, which honestly, you and I thought that this team had a shot. And now it looks like they don't. In fact, I don't think they have a shot. And when tensions get high and tempers get high, small things act as a huge catalyst.
And to your point, Scott Service, the manager of the Mariners, said, quote, "Things happen in a clubhouse. Our guys are working through it and talking through it. It's unfortunate, but it happens. It happens a lot more than you know. Almost every year you see it. Sometimes it brings them together. Things reach a boiling point, and you have to get it off your chest. With how our season has gone, the frustration mounts. Along the way, there are bumps in the road," close quote.
Yeah. And I will say this. Everybody has sort of either gotten very tense about this or given up on it. And the fans, I think, are in the give up mode.
It's got to feel like Groundhog Day to them. I mean, it's got to feel like, here we freaking go again.
According to one of the people who's quoted in this article, Ryan Divish, who's a beat writer for the Seattle Times, he says that the 11,265 tonight, September 4th, this being written on September 4th, tonight at Safeco, is the 9th smallest crowd in club history. The last time they had a sub 12,000 crowd was September 9th, 2014 against the Astros. And you got to think that is indicative of a fan base who has seen this club have great opportunities to succeed and been mediocre in the face of those opportunities.
They're just bleeping tired of it.
Yeah. Yep. I agree.
Yeah, and we'll touch on that here in just a minute as we get into our power rankings. You know, I don't know. It is, man. It really is sad. We're pretty much living in the West today. Our last story before we get to your power rankings, we're not going to get too much. Actually, we'll look at the standings real quick, get to this last story, and then our power rankings real fast. We mentioned to you, we have our first team to 100 wins. It is accurate. The Baltimore Orioles are 41 and 102.
100 losses then.
Yes. We didn't say
our first
team to 100. They are the first century digit team. Saying Red Sox lead, of course, the Yankees behind. Man, the Rays 78 and 64. I'm telling you right now, Kevin Cash and Bob Melvin, my top two candidates for AL Manager of the Year, hands down, bar none. The AL Central is the same as it has been for the last 2 months. Cleveland, Minnesota, Detroit, Chicago, Kansas City. In the West, it's so much fun right now. Astros 3 games above the Oakland A's at 90 and 54. I would expect the Astros, they should be able to win 10 more games. The craziness is there's a possibility the A's could actually win 100 games. I don't think they will make it there. They might finish a couple of games short, but they are second. The Mariners, a distant third, follow the Angels and the Rangers. Flipping around, man, I called it. The Braves still sitting on top with a decent lead right now, 4.5 games up on the Phillies. Those are the only two teams in the East above 500. The Nationals, the Mets, the Marlins round out the bottom of the Central. The NL West, I know I had not forgotten the Central. We'll get there. That's probably the best division right now in the National League. Right now, the West separated by 2.5 games out of the top three. The Rockies on top. The Dodgers a half game back. The Diamondbacks 2.5 games out. The Giants and the Padres rounded out. The odd thing here, man, is we think, oh, my gosh, there's 3 teams within 2.5 games. That's got to be the best division. No, that's a division that has no clear top team, and they're just leapfrogging each other until the end of the year, and someone's going to make it, and the other two aren't. The National League Central, the Cubs right now with 2-game lead over the Brewers. But all of a sudden, the Cardinals are making noise. They're 4.5 games out, but the Brewers and the Cardinals are the 2 teams in the National League wild card right now. The Phillies are out. Any other NL West team is out. The Pirates are sitting even at 571 and 71. And the Reds, yes, they are 61 and 83, but markedly better than we thought they would be coming into this year and the way they began this year. It's just going to be it'll be a lot of fun, and our power rankings are going to be a little bit different.
That's not entirely fair. The Dodgers are a game out of the wild card. They could theoretically make a run to that wild card.
Right. I'm saying as of right now.
As of right now.
As of right now, it is an all NL Central wild card. I'm not saying that that's how it will end. I don't. The Cardinals have been playing incredibly well. I think the problem that you and I have is we just don't know what to expect out of the West.
Right. Like I said when we were talking and when we were discussing power rankings, I don't think a win in the National League West even gives you a top 10 opportunity to win the World Series this year. I don't think that deserves a top 10 spot in the power rankings, although we have to give one to the division leader. Right. But who is going to be the division leader? Because
I'll tell you here's one thing we do know. We know A.J. Hinch is going to be the Astros leader for at least the next 4 years.
Right. Which is good. I think assigning him to an extension, re-signing him and keeping him on for a long period of time is going to be great for the Astros, because the things that he has done in Houston have turned that team around. They had the talent. They needed the leadership.
He's ended through 2024 or 2022. He's in his 4th year with the ball club. He's 44 years old. Won 86 games, 84 games his first couple of years. And then all of a sudden he's like, hey, by the way, we're going to win the World Series this year. And then we're just going to look really freaking good the rest of the way. This is a guy who I know my dad is not a fan of Dave Roberts. Not completely sure what the beef is, but not his managerial cup of tea. I do like A.J. Hinch. I think he's a player's manager. Not quite the same sort of guy as a Terry Francona, who is probably the best player manager in the game today. But you're right. He's a guy who has been with this ball club and has watched these young guys develop, and Springer and Gurriel. Obviously, he's seen guys like McCullers. Has helped turn Altuve in, from being just a little small kind of David Eckstein, size guy who you didn't think about to, a perennial batting an MVP candidate, or batting title MVP candidate, and maybe even a Hall of Fame candidate down the road. Certainly when we saw guys like Service this year, we just mentioned him a little bit ago. Of course, Paul Molitor last year getting an extension. Nothing wrong at all with A.J. Hinch picking up an extra contract extension for 4 more
years. Right. No, absolutely. Well, I think maybe it's time to move on to our power rankings. A little bit of a surprise this week.
you want to go ahead and explain what we're doing before we get into it?
Yeah.
We're going to give you guys 13 teams, and we do know that in hosting the show there are still 30 teams in Major League Baseball. But Chris and I both are in agreement on this, in that we're in September now. Well, of course, we're all in agreement on that, I think, unless you think the world is flat like Kyrie Irving does. But we are at a point where, really beyond a certain point, the power rankings have no purpose. The whole idea of this is who has the best chance to win the World Series. Well, beyond a certain point, no one has a chance in hell of winning the World Series. They might have never mind, I'm not going to go there, a better chance of having a part of your body strangled than winning the World Series. So, in this, as we went through it, we found the 13 teams that we believe have the best chance to either win the World Series or make their way into the playoffs, and if they do, make some noise. And these are the 13 teams that we are giving you as far as our power rankings. Now, if you want to check out Matt Anderscavage's power rankings all the way top to bottom, you can do that on thegruelingtruth.net. The way he does it is a little bit different than us. We're going more off the eye test and, the way that we have watched these teams play and what we think will happen down the stretch. He does it more off analytics and numbers. So you'll see some different numbers, maybe a couple of different results. But I think for the most part, we tend to, I think, see eye to eye. And, man, not much really, there's not a lot of question here.
Well, there's not a lot of movement at the top.
Right. Now, granted, I think the one thing I thought maybe we could have moved Oakland up one, but that's kind of just, at the end of the day, is it really going to matter? No.
And at the end of the day, they're still behind the Yankees.
Right. It's Boston, Houston, the Yankees, and Oakland, the top four. It's been that way last month. Going to say the same. Boston is by far, undeniably the best team in baseball by a long shot. The Astros are a team who are having their own struggles, but still sit as a number 2 team in the league. But there is I think, a significant difference between the two. The Yankees and the Athletics, I mean, you could say a 1A or a 3A and a 3B sitting right now. They are very even teams right now, and I think what's helping the Yankees is more where they started out. The way they started the year out has given them a decent cushion as the A's make this big push.
Chicago Cubs coming in at number 5. I think that's a pretty safe bet. They're the best team in the National League, in my opinion, right now. As far as with an opportunity to win this thing, I don't think anybody's beating the Red Sox, to be honest with you, unless it's either the A's or the Yankees, possibly the Houston Astros.
Okay. So wait, I didn't. So you actually think the A's? Do you think the A's have a better chance than the Astros? Just judging by the way you said that, I'm coming into this completely blind, and that kind of threw me for a loop there a minute.
I think that in a short series, if the Boston Red Sox were to draw the Oakland A's in the division series.
So you think 5 games of power by the A's could push them past the Red Sox in in a rough series? I
think so. I think once we've watched this team get swept by the Tampa Bay Rays, who in their own right have every right to be on this list, except for the fact that they play in the American League East and are 19 games out of any possibility of being in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, 8 games out of the wild card, they're not going to make it, unfortunately. The Mariners are 7.5 back. I mean, both those you're not going to see on the list. Sucks.
But if they were a National League team, they'd be in the playoffs. We'd be talking contention probably for the division at this point.
Yeah, and that's an absolutely insane thing to think about.
But I think in a 5-game series, Oakland could beat Boston. I think in a 7-game series, it's going to take a team like Houston. Realistically, I think
pitching depth. You think in a 7-game series, you need the deeper rotation at that point.
And if Manaea can't come back, that's the key.
Yeah. I think Fires can probably get you through a game. Chris Davis is leading the Major League Baseball with 41 home runs. And like you said, you can get hot for a couple of games and propel yourself into series. But yeah, long term, I agree with you with the way you see that. Yeah,
I think the best series that we have a possibility of watching at this point, to be 100% honest right now, is an ALCS between Houston and Boston. I think it's the most fun to watch. Not that the Yankees and the Red Sox wouldn't be a historically good time.
Sure.
But I think the best, most fun series to watch is going to be Boston-Houston in the ALCS. Milwaukee, I mean, at this point, Milwaukee and Chicago are just going to duke it out to see who takes that division, and the other one's going to take the wild card slot. That's just how it's going to be. And I really want to see Atlanta take their division. We have them at number 7. I think Atlanta has a really good shot of winning, if not winning the World Series. I don't think anybody beats Boston in the World Series unless they don't go because they lose to one of these great American League teams.
Right.
But Milwaukee has a great shot of going deep in the playoffs if they can get there. So does Atlanta. Atlanta has a really great shot. All they have to do is win that division, and right now they're doing that. They have a really great shot of getting deep into this playoff series.
And I think this is really where you're seeing youth take its toll on the Phillies. Down the stretch, a brand new skipper and Gabe Kapler, a lot of young talent, guys like Rhys Hoskins, his first full year, or Scott Kingery. Probably one of the biggest veterans is either Jake Arrieta or was it Carlos Santana, I believe, from the Indians. So it's one of those moments where there's a lot of youth here, and I think you're beginning to see not fractures or fissures here. You're just seeing youth. I wouldn't even say overwhelmed. They're just having a hard time, closing out these games when it really, really matters. 162 games is a long time, but when you're down to 23 games, all of a sudden your margin for error is. We're talking, like hitting a fastball. Either you're right on it or you're just below it. Which one are you going to be? And so far, they've been just below it.
Right. Cleveland's on this list because Cleveland is the best team in the Central, and Cleveland is the best team in the Central because the other teams in the Central are terrible.
Yeah, they're the best team in the worst division.
Right. St. Louis is in that number 2 wild card slot right now, and they are hanging on by the skin of their teeth. But they're playing damn good baseball there in the Midwest.
Adam Wainwright coming back. He was reinstated from the DL. Mike Schilt was named as the next full-time manager of the Cardinals. So after taking over for a fired Mike Matheny just prior to the All-Star break, he has pushed this team and willed this team and led this team into a great position down the stretch in September. He will be next year the full-time skipper of the St. Louis Cardinals. Your home team, the Diamondbacks, we sit number 10. Man, at some point here, we just had to figure out who out of the NL West had the best opportunity to win, or to make something happen. At the end of it, the NL West is just a little bit better, just a little bit better than the AL Central. And while we said, it's great that we have 3 teams within 2.5 games, but right now we're just leapfrogging each other. There is no one able to actually grab a hold of this division and hold on.
Right.
So the Diamondbacks at 10, the Dodgers at 11, the Rockies at 12. Even as the Rockies are leading the division, with a series coming up, the balance of power in that division can shift. And we said this 2-3 weeks ago, that in the last month and a half, this is going to be based on series, not we're not talking about the season as a whole. We're going to be talking about, can you win this series? How do you play out in this series? And the NL West is going to prove to be the biggest piece of that puzzle. Is how do these, does this Bud Selig scheduling where you play interdivision so doggone much, how is that going to play out when you have these 3 teams seeing each other a pretty good chunk the next 3 weeks?
Right. And round it out with Philadelphia. Philadelphia has an opportunity to take that division. I doubt they're going to make up the 4.5 games, but even if they don't, they could make up the wild card games if if St. Louis goes on a slide, which has been their want lately. So,
and a hell of a run overall. I mean, either way, you got to tip your cap to them.
Yeah. We didn't expect this from the Phillies, especially not after those early season woes that they were going through. I mean, we really thought when those stories came out about how poorly their new manager was doing that was going to be, well, that's sort of going to be the highlight of the season, is how bad is this guy going to screw this team up? And they were really able to buckle that down.
Yeah, and we're at a point now where Gabe Kapler should be in the discussion for Manager of the Year. Probably, I think, and I was a big proponent of Craig Counsell last year. That team looks really good, and granted, you picked up Lorenzo Cain, you picked up Christian Yelich, and he should be looked at again. Had Mike Schilt been there longer this year, he probably could have been looked at that. But I think right now your top three contenders are going to be Brian Snitker of the Braves, Gabe Kapler of the Phillies, and Craig Counsell of the Brewers. That to me is the most logical top three for the National League Manager of the Year. Guys, and this is something that we wanted to kind of impress upon you, and we've discussed this. We get it. We only gave you 13 teams, which means that there's 17 still out there that we haven't discussed. Well, now that we're in September, rosters have expanded. And those 17 teams are now trying to figure out just what in the world they actually have and where they need to go ahead and fix the glaring holes that they may be looking at. And that's what you're going to have at least 17 teams. And as we begin to get the magic numbers lower and lower, it's going to be more like 20 teams. And yes, we're going to have, the NL West play until the final day. You should be having the NL East playing until maybe the final week. Could be the final day, depending on how things shake out. The AL, same kind of way. But when you have 4 teams, in the AL Central, and you've got to see how those schedules break down. Chris, this is the point where we talked about how roster expansion can so drastically mess up the playoff picture, the layout of how things are going to be, because you have so many teams who aren't playing for anything or just getting guys reps, and you have teams who are fighting for spots that either are getting a chance to play those guys and get easy wins, or are kind of becoming the victim of circumstance because the teams that they're trying to chase or stave off are getting those kinds of games on their, in their backyard and able to put W's on the board in their favor.
Right. And realistically, allowing this roster expansion in September really allows teams who are out of it, teams like, any of the 17 teams that we didn't name, to go ahead and try to play spoiler for teams like Philadelphia and Colorado and St. Louis and Milwaukee, because a couple of key losses when the division leaders have key wins, that's it. Those teams are done. They don't get wild card slots. They don't get a playoff berth, nothing. And my problem with that is that why are we allowing teams with no hope, no shot, to essentially just go for broke at the end of the season and take down these teams that are on a push by having a 40-man roster that's so deep and letting these guys, who knows if they're going to bring up a guy from AAA on this expanded roster who's going to be a phenom someday, who just has a hot bat in September and does play spoiler to one of these teams.
And sometimes it's a double-A pitcher you want to put in the bullpen. And you know what? And I get, and you guys could say, and we've argued it back and forth, that, hey, you're going to have the same, option here for teams like the Dodgers or the Diamondbacks, who are a half game back and maybe need that extra boon out of the bullpen, need that extra young arm who's fresh and hasn't been throwing a lot. It's a chance to look. Yeah, okay, maybe that does end up giving them an advantage. But for the most part, it's going to be teams taking advantage of the youth and inexperience out there to go ahead and get wins, because we all know, you're playing for draft picks at this point, and your record is going to determine where you go. And while draft picks in Major League Baseball are the least sure thing of any professional sport, they're still a hot commodity.
Right, exactly. And not only that, but those draft picks can equal extra international player pool money if you're able to make a trade for them. They could be a big name in the form of trading prospects for big names. So, I don't like the expanded rosters. I don't like the way September baseball goes, but baseball is what baseball is. And I look forward to seeing this next 20 or so days play out.
Yeah. I mean, we've heard guys say, man, this extra wild card is, was never really a purpose, go back to the way it used to be, or, do like basketball and just put, the best teams, the best, whatever, eight teams, whatever. Yeah, sure. But at the end of the day with baseball, you're normally going to see the best team win anyway. The most complete team is going to end up being the team that finds a way to be successful.
Right.
And that second wild card has made it a whole hell of a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah. Give me 2 more wild cards. Let them play a couple of one-game playoffs. Give me 4 wild cards. Let them play each other, and then let the winner of those 2 games play a 3-game playoff. Let the winner of those 2 games, the 2 winners of those 2 games, play a 3-game playoff to get into the divisional series, and then let's get the postseason started. Take the season back down to 154 games. Give me 4 wild cards. I'd love every minute of it.
Does a lot of math right there. It's almost 10:45 here, man. That was too much for me.
Bro, if I can do it, you can do it.
You want to talk about Jose Abreu before we leave again?
No, I'm good. I think we've talked about testicular torsion one too many times.
Yeah, I agree.
I think once is one too many times.
Yeah. On the bright side, at least nobody pulled your handbrake while you're driving 140 on a racing bike.
Oh, man. I saw that video, and it made me so angry. Because that's attempted murder, man. If he that was his front brake.
Yeah.
If he'd have went over, that's it, 140 miles an hour. Are you kidding me? 140 mile an hour face plant? That's a scorpion from hell, man.
I'm just gonna if he had, I am saying this in much jest as possible because he did not. But had he scorpion that epically. I mean, you got to go out on ridiculousness to Rob Dyrdek. I mean that's got to be one of the look, y'all. I'm sorry, but the entire point of the show is to appreciate the scorpion. And as I'm saying that, you're giving me the Tony Montana.
I completely agree.
No, you're giving me like the De Niro. Like, that's right, man.
That's okay. So, but yeah, no, I agree.
So, guys, again, thanks so much for hanging out with us. If you stopped by the first time today, it was awesome having you here. Come around, hang out. Be sure to go by Out of Left Field, Chris and Graham, our Facebook page. Follow us on Facebook. Give it a like. Leave us a comment. Say hello. Be sure to check out the podcast. Of course, you can find it on the Grueling Truth site via Spreaker, of course, iHeartRadio, iTunes as well. If you have an iPhone, you can also download the Grueling Truth app and listen to the show that way. Just look for Out of Left Field, and that'll be how you find our show every week. A lot of good stuff. Appreciate y'all hanging out with us. Hope we didn't get y'all too uncomfortable. Nothing too far below the belt. We'll put the ball in play again next week here on Out of Left Field. We'll see you next week.